Chapter 109. Xianxia continued to stroll along the street. Since he had successfully bought this strange white stone, Xianxia was no longer in a hurry to study what was so special about this white stone. Instead, he continued to stroll along the street to see if there was any chance of encountering another treasure. However, there was one thing that Xianxia found strange. Ever since he bought the white stone, the 2 light spots in his dantian had calmed down once again and did not cause the slightest ripple. Xianxia did not intend to care about such a matter now. He could only wait until he had time at night to take out the white stone and study it. He wanted to see if he could use the white stone as a breakthrough point to find a solution to the problem of the 2 light spots in his dantian. Once the problem of the 2 light spots was solved, Xianxia's cultivation would undoubtedly be much smoother. Although the existence of the 2 light spots allowed Xianxia to absorb the energy from the demon cores and cultivate 3 times faster than usual, and could also help Xianxia solve the problem of the violent elements in the demon cores. However, the consumption of the demon cores was too great. It was so great that Xianxia was worried about his future cultivation path. If it was possible, Xianxia would rather his cultivation speed return to how it was before and solve the violent elements in the demon cores by himself. He did not want to have an uncontrollable variable in his dantian. After all, in Xianxia's opinion, the purple and green light spots were a ticking time bomb that could explode at any time. Although his cultivation speed would be much slower in this way, at least he would not have to worry about the demon cores all day long. Moreover, even without the demon cores, he could completely rely on absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to cultivate. Moreover, with the removal of the 2 light spots in his dantian, even if Xianxia absorbed the energy from the demon cores to cultivate, the consumption of the demon cores would be reduced by a lot. A rank 3 demon core was enough to support him for several days or even more than 10 days of consumption. In this way, if Xianxia spent a day hunting demon cores, it would be enough for him to cultivate for several months. With the reduction of the time spent hunting demon cores, Xianxia would have more time to spend on cultivation. In this way, even if the purple and green light spots in his dantian were removed, it would not have much impact on Xianxia's overall cultivation speed. Xianxia strolled aimlessly on the street, his eyes constantly looking at the stalls on both sides of the street. He even occasionally went into some shops to take a look. The occurrence of the strange white stone had undoubtedly given Xianxia a wake-up call. Therefore, Xianxia was now strolling on the street with the intention of finding treasures. He wanted to see if he could find any strange things or things that he was interested in, or if he encountered something that could cause the 2 light spots in his dantian to act abnormally. Unfortunately, after strolling along the way, Xianxia was greatly disappointed. There was no harvest at all. It seems that these things can only be found by chance. Xianxia let out a helpless sigh. Looking at the sky and seeing that it was getting late, he lost the mood to continue strolling. Xianxia glanced behind him, the trace of a cold smile appearing at the corner of his mouth. He muttered in a low voice, "It's getting late. After dealing with those people behind me, I should find a restaurant to rest. Tomorrow morning, I still have to go to the mountain range of magical beasts with everyone." As he spoke, Xianxia looked around and found a street with fewer people to pass through. After that, Xianxia continued to pass through the streets. His pace wasn't fast, as if he was casually strolling along the street. However, the roads he took were all relatively remote and less populated. After passing through a few more secluded alleys, Xianxia finally arrived at a secluded alley. At the end of the alley was a wall over 4 meters tall. This was actually a dead end. Xianxia stopped and stretched his body. He then turned around to look at the secluded alley behind him. A trace of a cold smile of disdain appeared on his face as he said in a flat tone, "Friend, you've followed me for so long. Don't tell me you don't dare to come out and meet me?" Not long after Xianxia finished speaking, a group of people suddenly surged out from the originally secluded alley. There were over 10 of them, all around the age of 20 or 30. The oldest one looked to be nearing 40. As soon as these people appeared, they immediately spread out and blocked the only exit of this small alley. Obviously, they didn't want Xianxia to leave from this only exit. Then, these people maintained their formation and slowly walked towards Xianxia. Every one of them stared at Jianshan with a fierce look on their faces. Jianshan still had a smile on his face as he watched these people slowly walk towards him. It was as if he didn't see their fierce looks at all. With his eyesight and the help of his powerful god, he could clearly see the strength of these people. Among them, the weakest was actually not even a saint. There were also 3 great saints. What surprised Jianshan the most was that the one who looked the oldest among them actually had the strength of a saint master. Moreover, he was a level higher than the leader of the Raging Flame Perpetual Guest Group, Kendall. He was a mid-level saint master. This person was a middle-aged man around the age of 40. He wore a green robe and had a fierce look on his face. He had short hair that was an inch long on his head. There was a large beard on both sides of his lips and under his chin. "Gentlemen, you have followed me for so long. May I know what you want?" Jianshan still had a smile on his face as he asked in a flat tone. The oldest middle-aged man with the strength of a mid-level saint master stared fiercely at Jianshan and said in a deep voice, "So you discovered us long ago." Jianshan slowly crossed his arms in front of his chest and said with a smile, "Of course. You guys have followed me so openly and for so long. It's hard not to be discovered." Hearing this, the middle-aged man with the strength of a mid-level saint master revealed a look of realization and said, "So that's how it is. We were too careless." Speaking up to here, the middle-aged man's expression suddenly changed. He stared at Jianshan with a pair of sharp eyes and said in a deep voice, "Brat, the only exit of this path has been sealed by us. If you don't want to die, immediately throw your spatial belt and all the valuables on you to me. Otherwise, you can prepare to lie here forever. If you want the things on me, it depends on whether you have the strength to take them." Although Jianshan's tone was flat, the coldness contained within could be clearly heard by anyone. Hearing this, the middle-aged man didn't waste any more words. He waved his hand and shouted, "Everyone go! Take him down and everything on him will be ours." Hearing the middle-aged man's words, the dozen or so people around him immediately charged at Jianshan. Saint weapons appeared in their hands at the same time. Among them, there were a few people who hadn't reached the saint realm, but they also held iron rods and iron machetes in their hands and charged at Jianshan without any fear. Seeing the dozen or so people charging at him, Jianshan sneered. When the dozen or so people were less than 10 meters away from him, Jianshan gently leapt up and flew into the air like a swallow. His feet kicked off the walls on both sides of the alley and he leapt over the dozen or so people's heads, heading straight for the middle-aged man. At the same time, a silver-white sword suddenly appeared in his right hand. It turned into a silver-white bolt of lightning in the air, stabbing towards the middle-aged man's throat at a speed that was difficult to see with the naked eye. As his strength continued to increase, Jianshan's body had been tempered by Saint Force through a special method, causing his body to become much stronger than before. With the strengthening of his body and the increase of Saint Force, Jianshan's sword was much faster than before. This ordinary sword strike was so fast that even great saints would find it difficult to block it. After all, in order to increase the speed of an attack, not only did it require a large amount of Saint Force, it also required an extremely strict requirement on the body. As a result, not only was Jianshan's swift sword unbreakable in the Jianghu of his previous life, even on the Tianyuan continent, unless it was someone who was much stronger than him, no one on the same level as Jianshan would be able to block his swift sword. If Jianshan used his full strength, people of the same level as him would not even have the chance to react before their throats were slit. Seeing Jianshan's menacing sword strike, the middle-aged man sneered. A machete that was half a person's height suddenly appeared in his right hand. The middle-aged man gripped the machete with both hands as powerful Saint Force circulated around it. With a roar, he swung the machete at Jianshan's sword. Ding! When the light wind sword and the middle-aged man's machete collided, the sound of metal clashing rang out. When the two saint weapons collided, the resulting shockwave actually caused the middle-aged man to take a step back. He then looked at Jianshan with a look of shock and disbelief. This was because the middle-aged man did not put Jianshan in his eyes at all. In his eyes, Jianshan was at most in his 20s and only had the strength of a saint. No matter how much of a genius he was, He would at most have just entered the great saint realm. To a team like him, Xianxia was not a threat at all. But after this exchange, the middle-aged man was shocked to discover that even though he thought highly of Xianxia's strength was still far from what he had expected. Even when compared to him, the middle-aged man was not much weaker. Chapter 110. Come on! The middle-aged man shouted as he swung his machete towards Xianxia without the slightest fear. However, at this moment, his expression had become serious. Ding ding ding! In the quiet alley, a series of clanging sounds could be heard as Xianxia and the middle-aged man moved quickly in this narrow alley. Xianxia was facing a mid-level saint master with the strength of a mid-level great saint, but in a head-on battle, he was actually not at a disadvantage at all. Xianxia's movements were light and nimble as he moved around the middle-aged man like a ghost. The silver-white light wind sword in his hand constantly turned into silver-white rays of light that pierced towards the middle-aged man's throat from different directions. The middle-aged man's machete had been completely blocked by Xianxia's attacks. In the beginning, the middle-aged man could occasionally fight back against Xianxia's tide-like attacks, but as the speed of Xianxia's sword continued to increase, the middle-aged man gradually lost the ability to resist and could only blindly block. It wasn't that the middle-aged man couldn't fight back, but if he fought back, he was afraid that before his attack could land on Xianxia, his throat would be pierced by this lightning-fast sword. The middle-aged man's forehead was already covered with a layer of fine sweat. He never thought that this youth who looked to be in his 20s would actually be so powerful. With his strength as a mid-level saint, he was actually almost unable to resist. The most frightening thing for the middle-aged man was that this youth's sword was simply too fast. Not only was the speed of the sword astonishing, but the frequency of the sword was also frightening. Now, the middle-aged man's heart was filled with regret. If he knew that Xianxia was so powerful, he wouldn't have followed him no matter what. In the small alley, more than 10 people were staring blankly at the intense battle between Xianxia and the middle-aged man. They also didn't think that Xianxia, who looked younger than them, would actually have the strength to contend with their boss. Although they still had more than 10 people, in the face of such a battle, they couldn't interfere. Even if they rashly went up, they would just be throwing their lives away. Although there were 3 great saints among them, with their strength as great saints, they could clearly see the battle. With their eyesight, they could see that their boss was already at a disadvantage. He was being beaten by Xianxia to the point where he couldn't even fight back. His life could be said to be in danger at any time. Even if they rushed up, it would be useless. This was because they didn't have any confidence in being able to dodge Xianxia's lightning-fast sword. Xianxia and the middle-aged man exchanged a few more rounds. Taking advantage of the time when the middle-aged man was blocking, a sharp light flashed in Xianxia's eyes. His right arm suddenly shook and shot out like lightning. Under the control of his arm, the light wind sword in his hand turned into a silver-white light as it shot towards the middle-aged man's throat. In a flash, the sword had arrived in front of the middle-aged man's throat. This was the fastest sword attack that Xianxia had ever made. The middle-aged man was aghast. Facing this extremely fast sword, he had almost completely lost the ability to dodge or block. This sword was simply too fast. In the eyes of the middle-aged man, this sword's speed had reached an unimaginable level. It wasn't something that he could dodge. The middle-aged man's face instantly became incomparably pale. Just when he thought that he was going to die, the silver-white light wind sword suddenly stopped in front of his throat. At this critical moment, it suddenly stopped, and the sharp tip of the sword just happened to touch the middle-aged man's throat. Even though the light wind sword didn't pierce the middle-aged man's throat, the middle-aged man still felt that it was difficult to breathe. At the place where the sword was pointing at his throat, he felt a sharp pain, as if his throat had been cut open by the sword. The middle-aged man's body maintained its original position as he stood there in a daze. Right now, he didn't even dare to move. He was afraid that if he made the slightest movement, the silver sword would mercilessly pierce through his throat. The middle-aged man's face was already covered in a thin layer of cold sweat. The middle-aged man looked at Xianxia with eyes full of fear. His voice trembled as he begged for mercy. Great hero, please spare my life. Great hero, please spare my life. Next time, this lowly one will not dare to offend great hero. With his life in the hands of the other party, the middle-aged man could no longer care about his reputation and the fact that Xianxia was much younger than him. In his opinion, as long as he could keep his life, it was not impossible for him to kneel down to Xianxia. Xianxia calmly stared at the middle-aged man, a cold smile appearing at the corners of his mouth. He then slowly sheathed his sword and said in a flat tone, "I'm in a good mood today and don't want to start a massacre. In the future, you'd better take care of yourselves. Don't let me see you doing this again. This place is so close to the magical beast mountain range. With your strength, hunting some low-level magical beasts is more than enough." Throwing down these words, Xianxia strode out of the small alley. Yes, we will definitely follow Great Hero's instructions and will definitely not do this again. The middle-aged man hurriedly opened his mouth and said, looking at his appearance, it seemed that he did not dare to disobey Xianxia's orders in the slightest. When Xianxia's figure disappeared into the small alley, the middle-aged man let out a long breath and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. Now that he thought back to that moment of life and death, the middle-aged man felt a burst of fear. Just a moment ago, his life had been hanging by a thread and he had almost been finished. After leaving the small alley, Xianxia passed through several streets and then found an inn to stay in. At night, Xianxia sat cross-legged on the bed, holding a fist-sized white stone in his hand and studying it. What is this thing? It looks like a stone, but the material is a bit different. It's called iron, but it's a bit different from iron. Staring at the fist-sized white stone in his hand that weighed 100 kilograms, Xianxia's face was full of doubts. At the beginning, it was completely because of the purple and green light in Xianxia's dantian that attracted Xianxia's interest in this white stone. At that time, Xianxia could clearly feel that the two light spots in his dantian were inconceivably excited and happy, but the moment he bought this white stone, the two light spots in his dantian once again quieted down and returned to their former state. Now, even if he held the white stone in his hand, it would not cause the two light spots in his dantian to move in the slightest. Moreover, Xianxia did not know the origin of this strange white stone. Although he had read many books in the Academy's library, he still could not find any information about this white stone. Xianxia held the white stone in his hand and looked at it for a long time. Apart from knowing that this white stone was very hard, there was nothing else. Even if he soaked it in water and burned it with fire, there was no change in the stone. In the end, Xianxia could only helplessly put the white stone back into his space belt. Afterwards, Xianxia once again observed the purple and green light spots in his dantian. Right now, the two light spots were in the same situation as before, quietly entrenched there without the slightest movement. Although the two light spots were in Xianxia's dantian, Xianxia could do nothing about them. He could not even approach them and could only look at them from afar. This was because there was a mysterious force protecting the two light spots. Once Xianxia wanted to approach them, he would be obstructed by this mysterious force. Moreover, this mysterious force was extremely strong. With Xianxia's current strength, he was unable to break through this force. Therefore, the area around the two light spots was a completely forbidden zone for Xianxia. AI. Xianxia sighed secretly. Now that his dantian had such an accident, he did not know whether it was a blessing or a curse. This night, Xianxia did not cultivate as usual. Instead, he fell into a deep sleep on his bed. It had been 2 to 3 months since he left the kingdom of Jessan. Tonight was the first time he had slept in these few months. Sleeping was undoubtedly to replenish his spirit that had been exhausted during the day. Xianxia's spirit was already very strong. As long as he did not use his spirit to control the sword or control the holy force, which would exhaust his spirit too much, he could go for several days and nights without sleeping. In addition, he had always cultivated every night. During cultivation, his spirit could also recover quickly. Therefore, Xianxia's lack of sleep in the past few months did not affect his spirit at all. The next morning, Xianxia got out of bed feeling refreshed. He opened the window and looked at the scenery outside. Breathing in the fresh morning air, he sighed, "I haven't slept for several months. I've almost forgotten what it's like to sleep. Only now do I realize that sleeping is actually so comfortable. Afterwards, Xianxia paid the bill and directly left the inn. He went to buy a good horse and rode it to the meeting place he had agreed to meet with Kendall. The gathering place of the flame mercenaries was still the same dim hut. At the same time, this hut was also where the 8 of them rested together. A small mercenary group like the flame mercenaries did not have enough money to buy a large courtyard, so they could only stay together in this small place. Arriving in front of the hut, Xianxia fastened the horse's rope. Just when he was about to knock, the door suddenly opened. A skinny young man opened the door. He did not seem much older than Xianxia. He was the youngest person in the flame mercenaries apart from Xianxia, Xiao Dao. Xianxia faintly smiled. Xiao Dao, are you going out? Chapter 111. When Xianxia entered the room, he discovered that everyone, including Captain Kendall, was eating breakfast at the table. On the table was a large plate of steaming hot beef. Xianxia, let's eat together. We have to fight today, so we have to fill our stomachs. Only then will we have the strength to fight the magical beasts. Captain Kendall stood up from his chair and pulled Xianxia over to a chair beside him. Hoopa stuffed a large piece of mutton into his mouth and chewed in large bites. He mumbled, "Yeah, we have to fill our stomachs today. If we encounter powerful magical beasts, we'll have the strength to run away even if we can't defeat them." Hearing this, Captain Kendall glared at Hoopa and snappily said, "Hoopa, do you really want to encounter magical beasts that we can't defeat? If we encounter a Class 4 magical beast that excels in speed, all of our lives will be lost in the magical beast mountain range." Kendall, I'm just saying. Do you need to be so serious? You're even using Class 4 magical beasts to scare me. It's not like we're going into the depths of the mountain range. How can we encounter Class 4 magical beasts? Hoopa said with some dissatisfaction. Sitting at the table, Xianxia did not hold back. He picked up a piece of beef with his chopsticks and placed it in his mouth. He said, "Uncle Kendall, Hoopa's right. Class 4 magical beasts can only be found in the depths of the mountain range. As long as we don't enter the depths of the mountain range, we won't encounter any Class 4 magical beasts." Xianxia had stayed in the magical beast mountain range for quite some time, so he was rather clear on these matters. "You can't say that." Captain Kendall's face suddenly became stern. He looked around and said with a deep voice, "Even though we're only moving around the outskirts of the magical beast mountain range, we still can't let our guard down. Although Class 4 magical beasts normally move around in the depths of the mountain range, there are a few exceptions. Some bored Class 4 magical beasts, or magical beasts that are being hunted down, can come to the outskirts from the depths of the mountain range. Something like this is not uncommon on the Tianyuan continent. Who knows how many times it has already happened?" Hearing this, Xianxia nodded slightly. He agreed with Captain Kendall's words. This was because he had read about this in the books in the Academy's library. Some powerful magical beasts that should have stayed in the depths of the magical beast mountain range would occasionally appear in the outskirts of the mountain range. However, this kind of thing was very rare. At the very least, during the time that Xianxia had stayed in the magical beast mountain range, he had never encountered a magical beast of the 4th rank in the outskirts. Even magical beasts of the 3rd rank were very rare. Of course we know that. Although we've never encountered one before, we've heard about it from many of our peers. Alright, Kendall, stop talking about it. You're making everyone feel heavy-hearted. If something like this really does happen, it's just our bad luck. Let's eat quickly so we can be on our way once we're full. The one who spoke was a middle-aged man who was about the same age as Kendall. He was the strongest person in the Inferno mercenary group apart from Kendall, Deer. He possessed the strength of a high-level great saint and was only a step away from becoming a sage master. Everyone quieted down as soon as Deer opened his mouth. They all lowered their heads and continued to eat, throwing the beef into their stomachs. Soon, the large plate of beef was emptied, not leaving a single scrap. After filling their stomachs, the group didn't stay for long. They immediately set off for the magical beast mountain range. Of the 9 people, only Xianxia was riding a horse. The other 8 were all walking. Xianxia, once we're outside the mountain range of magical beasts, what are you going to do with this horse? You can't possibly bring this horse into the mountain range of magical beasts, right? Looking at the white horse beneath Xianxia, Captain Kendall asked in confusion. With that, Xianxia chuckled. He rubbed the snow-white fur on the horse's back and said, "This place is almost 20 kilometers away from the mountain range. I'll directly return its freedom once we reach the outskirts of the mountain range." Xiao Dao immediately leapt up when he heard that. He stared at Xianxia and cried out, "No way, Xianxia, are you going to set it free? That's too much of a waste of money." Xianxia smiled. "Isn't setting it free the same as returning its freedom? The world is vast, so whether it can survive on the Tianyuan continent will depend on its luck." On the Tianyuan continent, horses were only the most common and lowest form of transportation. At the same time, the spiritual energy on the Tianyuan continent was abundant. Not only could wild beasts absorb the energy of the world or eat heavenly resources to become magical beasts, even horses had the opportunity to advance. At the very least, Xianxia had read in a book that a horse with the strength of a Class 5 magical beast had appeared on the Tianyuan continent 100 years ago. However, due to the limitations of the horse's body, its innate condition was extremely poor. Advancing was an extremely difficult path for them, and it took a very long time as well. Although they were walking, their speed was not slow. After roughly 2 hours of hurrying, they finally arrived at the mountain range of magical beasts. Looking at the lush forest before them, Xianxia dismounted from his horse and followed the group into the forest. Xianxia did not pay any attention to the white horse. It would naturally leave after some time. From now on, everyone be careful. Although most of the creatures in the forest are wild beasts, we still can't be careless. Kendall sternly glanced at everyone before continuing, "Dear, Hupa, and I will walk at the front of the group. Zhoudai, Zhou Shaokai, Chang Ningfeng, you three will walk at the back. The rest of you will walk in the middle." Afterwards, the group quickly advanced in the formation that Kendall had arranged. Along the way, there were many wild beasts that came to disturb them, but they were not even Class 1 magical beasts. They posed no threat to the group at all. After walking in this manner for 6 hours, the flame mercenaries finally passed through the forest and arrived at the outskirts of the magical beast mountains. There were already Class 1 magical beasts roaming about here. Walking at the front of the group, Kendall looked around before turning back to the group and saying, "Now, everyone be prepared to fight at any time. We can encounter Class 1 and Class 2 magical beasts at any time now." However, Kendall's words were clearly unnecessary. Apart from Xianxia, everyone in the group was already prepared to fight at any time. All of them looked around with sharp gazes. The team maintained their formation and continued to move forward vigilantly. However, after 4 hours of walking, they didn't encounter a single magical beast except for a few ignorant beasts. Xianxia walked in the middle of the group as his eyes flickered with uncertainty. Along the way, he had clearly sensed the subtle movements caused by the movements of many magical beasts. However, what puzzled him was that these magical beasts had only stopped for a while under the cover of the bushes when they were 10 meters away from them before retreating. Not a single one of them dared to jump out. Xianxia could not understand this no matter how hard he thought about it. Could it be that these magical beasts have discovered that our group is too powerful, so they don't dare to come and throw their lives away? Xianxia frowned as he thought to himself. When he had entered the magical beast mountains alone a few days ago, he had not encountered such a situation. After thinking for a while, Xianxia finally couldn't help but ask, "Uncle Kendall, do you feel that something is off?" Xianxia's words were undoubtedly very sensitive to the group at this time. Hearing this, everyone's gazes turned to Xianxia. Kendall asked, "Xianxia, is there something wrong?" Xianxia hesitated for a moment before saying, "This is clearly the range of activity of rank 1 magical beasts. Why haven't we encountered a single magical beast along the way?" Hearing this, everyone immediately let out a sigh of relief. They had originally thought that Xianxia had discovered something that would be detrimental to them. Kendall chuckled and said, "Xianxia, this situation is very normal. Although we have already entered the range of activity of rank 1 magical beasts, The magical beast mountains are very vast. We have only been walking in a straight line, so it is very normal that we did not encounter any magical beasts. This is because every time we entered the magical beast mountains in the past, it was the same situation. Xianxia frowned slightly, but he was clear in his heart that the actual situation was not like this at all. Captain Kendall, could it be that you have not encountered a single rank 1 magical beast before? Xianxia continued to ask. No, it is just that rank 1 magical beasts are very rare. Most of the magical beasts we encounter are rank 2 or 3. Of course, there are also times when we do not encounter a single rank 1 magical beast. Towards Xianxia's questions, Kendall did not feel impatient and carefully explained to Xianxia. Captain Kendall, then approximately how many magic cores do you usually obtain in a day? Xianxia asked. There is no need to talk about this. Captain Kendall pondered for a moment before replying. Under normal circumstances, we can harvest about 4 or 5 Class 2 magic cores a day. Sometimes, if we are lucky, we can even harvest 6 or 7 Class 2 magic cores. As for Class 3 magic cores, there are very few of them. Because we are only moving around the outskirts of the magical beast mountain range, Class 3 magic beasts rarely appear in this area. Therefore, the chances of encountering Class 3 magic beasts are very low. Moreover, Class 3 magic beasts are very difficult to kill. Once we start fighting, we will inevitably be injured. Therefore, unless we take the initiative to encounter a Class 3 magic beast, we simply cannot provoke a Class 3 magic beast. Chapter 112. Xianxia nodded inside when he heard Kendall's words. His impression of Kendall immediately rose to a whole new level. On the Tianyuan continent, where people's viciousness was no less than the Jianghu in his previous life, meeting someone as selfless as Captain Kendall who only cared about the lives of his subordinates was indeed very difficult. Most importantly, with Kendall's strength as a beginner Saint Master, he might not be able to kill a Class 3 magical beast by himself, but he was more than enough to deal with a Class 2 magical beast. It was a pity that he did not hunt Class 2 magical beasts by himself. Instead, he was willing to give up on his even more bountiful harvest, leading several great saints and Saint Realm members to hunt the magical beasts together. Although the harvest from hunting the magical beasts would be split according to the amount of contribution, Kendall's harvest would still be much less. It would not even be half of his harvest from hunting the magical beasts alone. Just this alone made Xianxia feel admiration for Captain Kendall. However, Xianxia felt speechless about the harvest Kendall's group had obtained in the magical beast forest. Even with a Saint Master leading the group and the support of 5 great saints, such a powerful group had only obtained a pitiful few monster cores in a day. Xianxia felt disbelief at this. After all, when he roamed the magical beast mountain range by himself, he would obtain at least 10 to 20 Class 2 magical beast cores in a day. As for Class 3 magical beast cores, he estimated that he would obtain around 10 to 20 Class 3 magical beast cores in a day. Such efficiency could not be compared to the flame mercenaries. At this moment, Xianxia's ears twitched slightly. He turned his head slightly and stared at a patch of weeds to his side with a cold gaze. He had already sensed that there was a magical beast moving around a dozen meters away from him. However, the magical beast's movements were extremely subtle, so Kendall's group did not notice it at all. The magical beast remained there for a while, but it did not attack them as Xianxia had expected. Instead, it quietly retreated. Sensing that the magical beast had retreated, Xianxia was even more puzzled. What's going on? Could it be that those demonic beasts have discovered that our team is too strong and think that they are no match for us? That's why they haven't come out to die in vain. Xianxia thought inwardly. But just as he thought of this, another doubt appeared in his mind. Because low-level magical beasts like these didn't have any intelligence, how could they make such a judgment? When Xianxia thought back to the last time he entered the magical beast mountain range, it didn't matter if it was rank 1, rank 2, or rank 3 magical beasts, they would all immediately rush out upon seeing him, or hide in some secret place to launch a sneak attack. The situation was completely different from now. What's going on? Could it be that we have too many people? Is that why those rank 1 magical beasts don't dare to come out? Jianxin's gaze swept over everyone, his face full of doubt. This was because along the way he had already discovered several magic beasts of about grade 1 hiding in the dark. At this time, there was a strange movement in the weeds in front of them. Then, a black shadow suddenly rushed out and shot towards Kendall at an extremely fast speed. Due to the fact that everyone had been vigilant along the way, the moment the black shadow appeared, it was immediately discovered by Commander Kant and Deer. Seeing the black shadow pouncing towards him, Commander Kant laughed heartily and shouted, "Good timing, we've finally met one." As he spoke, a large axe appeared in Captain Kendall's hand. Then, the sharp axe cut through the air, bringing with it a piercing sound as it chopped towards the incoming shadow at an extremely fast speed. Just as Kendall was about to attack, a palm-sized long sword appeared in Deer's hand, ready to attack at any time. Ding! The huge axe in Kendall's hand collided with the black shadow in midair, emitting a light ring. The black shadow's forward momentum came to an abrupt stop, and then it was sent flying by the powerful rebound force of the axe. The black shadow slid back 5 meters in the air before steadily landing on the ground. At this time, everyone could clearly see the true appearance of this black shadow. It was actually a tiger that was as tall as a person. Its entire body was pitch black, and on its front claws, several of those sharp claws had already been broken and were stained with blood. "Brothers, surround it!" Kendall shouted, and then waved the huge axe in his hand again to attack the black tiger in front of him. As for Hu Po, Chang Ningfeng, and Zhou Dekai, the 4 great saints, they each scattered around the black tiger to prevent it from escaping. As for Deer, who had the strength of an advanced great saint, he joined the battle with a long sword in his hand and joined forces with Kendall to kill the black tiger. This black tiger was a rank 2 magical beast. Facing the siege of a beginner saint and an advanced great saint, it could be said that it had no chance of winning. Soon, the black tiger's body was covered with terrifying wounds. Bright red blood flowed out from its body, dyeing its black fur purplish red. Jianxin, Xiao Dao, and Yun Xian stood in the distance and watched the battle without blinking. Due to the natural superiority of magical beasts, even an ordinary great saint was not a match for a rank 2 magical beast. Therefore, in such a battle, Xiao Dao and the others who only had the strength of a saint could not intervene at all. Even if they went up, they would probably increase the casualties for nothing. Looking at Kendall and Deer who were fighting the black tiger, Xiao Dao's face was full of eagerness. His eyes were full of yearning. From the looks of it, he wanted nothing more than to transform into Kendall and have a fierce battle with the black tiger. "I must cultivate seriously in the future and strive to reach the level of Saint Master as soon as possible. That way, I can hunt rank 2 magical beast cores by myself." Xiao Dao clenched his teeth and said fiercely. Hearing this, Yun Xian, who was standing beside Xiao Dao, couldn't help but chuckle. He said, "Xiao Dao, your strength is still at the intermediate Saint Master level. There's a considerable distance between you and the Saint Master level. With your cultivation talent, I reckon that you'll have to wait until you're 40 years old before you can become a Saint Master, or even more." "So what if I'm 40 years old? Didn't you see that Kendall became a Saint Master at this age? In any case, I will become a Saint Master one day." Xiao Dao replied with a bit of dissatisfaction. Then, his eyes revealed a trace of yearning as he muttered, "Once I have the strength of a Saint Master, I can roam the magical beast mountain range alone. Fighting against magical beasts by myself, how awe-inspiring would that be?" Seeing Xiao Dao's yearning expression, Yun Xian helplessly shook his head and muttered inwardly, "Is a Saint Master that amazing? Isn't it just bullying rank 2 magical beasts? Do you think that you can run amok in the magical beast mountain range just because you have the strength of a Saint Master?" Then, Yun Xian turned to Jianxin, who was standing beside him, and said, "Hey, Jianxin, how many times have you entered the magical beast mountain range? Seeing that you're so young, it can't be your first time, right?" Hearing this, Jianxin indifferently replied, "It should be the second time." Although Jianxin had entered the forest once to hunt magical beasts in Kargath Academy, that wasn't an official hunt. Moreover, the magical beasts in the forest were raised by the academy, so he directly ignored it. Yun Xian's eyes lit up, immediately becoming interested. He immediately asked, "Then how many people were there when you first entered the magical beast mountain range? How strong were they? Were there any powerful experts like Kendall?" Hearing this, Jianshan turned to look at Yun Xian. After a slight hesitation, he said, "The first time I entered the magical beast mountain range alone, but..." Before Jianshan could finish, Yun Xian interrupted, "What? The first time you entered the magical beast mountain range alone? Wow, Jianshan, I really admire you too much." Jianshan bitterly smiled. "Yun Xian, you don't need to be so loud. The first time I went alone, I only wandered around the outskirts of the magical beast mountain range." Yun Xian looked at Jianshan with a face full of admiration. "Jianshan, I really admire you. I admire your guts. Your guts are really too big. Don't you know that even the outskirts of the magical beast mountain range are very dangerous? If you encounter a first-rank magical beast, you can still escape if you can't beat it. But if you encounter a second-rank magical beast, then your little life will end there." After saying this, Yun Xian patted his chest, a look of fear on his face as he said, "But you brat, you're very lucky. You didn't encounter any magical beasts. Otherwise, you'd most likely be finished." "That's right, Jianshan. In the future, don't come to the magical beast mountain range alone. Although our journey was very peaceful, you mustn't look down on the magical beast mountain range because of this," Xiao Dao solemnly said. Hearing the words of the two, Jianshan bitterly smiled. "Oh, I know. Right now, let's watch the battle between Captain and Black Tiger. Watching this kind of battle will be of great help to you. At the very least, it'll be good for you to learn how to fight." Cabot stood beside Jianshan, looking at Jianshan with astonishment. His gaze swept over Jianshan from head to toe several times. His eyes flickered with a trace of bewilderment, but he didn't say anything. He calmly stood there, not saying a word. Hearing Jianshan's words, Xiao Dao and Yun Xian really didn't speak again, attentively watching the battle. Chapter 113. Ha! Captain Kendall suddenly let out a roar. Powerful saint force circulated around his huge axe, and he swung it at the black tiger's head like a bolt of lightning. The black tiger nimbly leaped and dodged Captain Kendall's axe. Then, with another low jump, it pounced at Captain Kendall and opened its bloody mouth to bite him. Captain Kendall quickly pulled back his axe and placed it in front of his body. Finally, the black tiger bit down on the handle of the axe. Immediately, the sharp teeth ground against the handle of the axe, which was even sharper than steel, producing an unpleasant creaking sound. The powerful impact of the black tiger's leap caused Captain Kendall to stagger back a few steps. With every step he took back, he left a deep mark on the ground. Very soon, the black tiger landed on all fours. Without giving Captain Kendall any time to react, it opened up its broken claws and quickly swiped at Captain Kendall's chest. Captain Kendall was shocked. The black tiger's attack speed was extremely fast, and the saint weapon in his hand had been bitten by the black tiger, making it impossible for him to use it. At this crucial moment, Captain Kendall suddenly sucked in a breath of air and his chest immediately caved in. At the same time, the black tiger's sharp claws tore through the air and slashed at Captain Kendall's chest, causing a few pieces of his clothes to flutter in the air. There were even a few drops of blood that were splashed by the black tiger's sharp claws. This time, even though Captain Kendall's chest had caved in from the attack, he didn't have enough time. His chest was still scratched by the black tiger's claws. Fortunately, it was only a superficial wound. Otherwise, Captain Kendall would have been heavily injured from this attack. Just as the black tiger's claws scratched past Kendall's chest, a huge sword as wide as a palm slashed through the air. With powerful saint force, it viciously struck the black tiger's back, leaving behind a wound so deep that bone could be seen. However, due to the force exerted by the sword, the wound was less than a palm's length. Jianshan helplessly shook his head as he watched the fight between the two men and the tiger. In his opinion, whether it was Captain Kendall or Deer, neither of them were able to fully utilize the advantage of their weapons. Who knew what kind of weapon they were using with their weapons? Moreover, their attacks were completely disorganized. They were just randomly slashing at each other. especially Deer, who used a sword, which made Jianchen extremely annoyed. Every weapon had its own unique characteristics, and at the same time, it had its own unique way of attacking. Deer didn't seem to know how to use a sword at all. In Deer's hands, the sword didn't display the slightest advantage of its sword skills. Sometimes, Deer even used the sword as a knife and used it to hack. The battle continued for a while. Both Deer and Captain Kendall had received some minor injuries. At this time, the black tiger suddenly roared towards the sky. The roar shook the sky as it pierced through the quiet magical Beast Mountain range. After the roar, the black tiger suddenly launched a few fierce attacks, temporarily avoiding Captain Kendall and Deer. Then it leaped and fled. "Be careful, it's escaping." "Quick, stop it. Don't let it escape." The direction the black tiger was escaping in was actually guarded by Chang Ningfeng. Seeing the black tiger pouncing towards him, Chang Ningfeng's eyes flashed with an ominous light. A sword suddenly appeared in his hand. Powerful saint force circulated around the sword as he quickly stabbed towards the black tiger. At this critical moment, Chang Ningfeng had to use all his strength to stop the black tiger. Otherwise, this long battle would have been in vain. When Chang Ningfeng made his move, the few mercenaries closest to him also quickly ran towards him. Leader Kendall and Deer also followed closely behind Black Tiger. The black tiger let out a deep roar as it waved its front claws. The remaining claws collided with Chang Ningfeng's sword. The powerful force from the claws directly shook the sword to the side. Afterward, the black tiger opened its huge mouth and bit towards Chang Ningfeng's head. Chang Ningfeng quickly retreated, and at the same time, he quickly withdrew his sword, and then stabbed towards the black tiger's huge mouth. Ding! Just as the sword entered the black tiger's wide-open mouth, the black tiger's mouth suddenly closed. It used its sharp and hard teeth to bite Chang Ningfeng's sword, making it impossible for Chang Ningfeng to pull the sword out of its mouth. "Die, you bastard!" At this moment, a loud shout came from behind the black tiger. Captain Kendall had already arrived behind the black tiger. He raised his huge axe high and chopped towards the black tiger. At the same time, Deer and the other great saints arrived in front of Chang Ningfeng to help him stall the black tiger. The black tiger abandoned the long sword in its mouth. Just as the giant axe in Kendall's hand was about to land on its body, the black tiger suddenly leaped nimbly and narrowly dodged the attack. Although the giant axe did not land on the black tiger's body, it still managed to cut through a layer of the black tiger's fur. The black tiger let out a painful howl, but it didn't stop moving. It immediately turned around and ran in the opposite direction. However, the black tiger's escape route just happened to be facing Jianchen and the others who didn't participate in the battle. Seeing the black tiger running towards them, Xiao Dao, Yun Xian, and the others were frightened to the point that their faces changed greatly. They all cried out in alarm, hugged their heads, and immediately rolled to the side. As for Kabuto's, he immediately used his fastest speed to avoid the black tiger and ran into the distance. Only Jianchen was still standing there in a daze without moving. His expression didn't change at all. Jianchen dodged quickly. The KFC captain shouted and immediately ran up, trying to catch up to the black tiger and stop it. However, even though he had the strength of a saint expert, in terms of speed, he was still inferior to the second-rank black tiger that was good at running. Seeing Jianchen in front of it, the black tiger's eyes flickered with an ominous scarlet light. It let out a low roar and suddenly jumped up, pouncing at Jianchen with extreme speed. Seeing Jianchen standing there without the slightest intention of dodging, the few great saints of the flame mercenaries all sighed helplessly, a trace of regret appearing on their faces. With regards to Jianchen's strength, everyone in the flame mercenaries believed that he only had the strength of a saint. In front of this black tiger that even great saints would have a hard time dealing with, a saint could be said to have no power to resist. Even though the black tiger was heavily injured, the beast's ferocious nature buried in its bones was completely aroused. Not only did the black tiger's fighting strength not decrease, it even increased a bit. Seeing the black tiger pouncing over, Jianchen's calm eyes suddenly flashed with a sharp light. Soon after, the 2 fingers wide and 4 feet long silver white light wind sword suddenly appeared in his right hand. Soon after, a silver-white light flashed in front of the black tiger. At the same time, Jianshan's body also turned, testing the distance of one step to the side. Bang! The black tiger's huge and cumbersome body heavily pounced on the place where Jianshan had just been standing, then its entire body stopped moving. In the next moment, bright red blood surged out from the black tiger's neck, slowly invading the surrounding soil along the uneven ground. Captain Kendall, who was rushing over, suddenly stopped. He stared blankly at the motionless black tiger on the ground as well as Jianshan, who was quietly standing on the side without any change in expression. His eyes were filled with shock and disbelief because just now, he clearly saw an unbelievably fast blurry sword shadow flash before the black tiger's eyes. Soon after, the black tiger fell to the ground and stopped moving. Captain Kendall's gaze finally landed on the 2 fingers wide silver sword in Jianshan's hand. He saw that the sword was smooth and shiny, without the slightest trace of blood on it. But the more it was like this, the more shocked Captain Kendall felt. He saw that in a short moment, countless changes had occurred in Jianshan's gaze. Doubt, surprise, disbelief, and shock were all present in Captain Kendall's eyes. At this time, the remaining 5 great saints finally rushed over. The 5 of them didn't discover that the black tiger was already dead. As soon as they arrived, the 5 of them surrounded the black tiger and immediately chopped at its body with their weapons. This magical beast is already dead. There's no need to fight anymore. Just as the 5 holy weapons were about to pierce the black tiger's body, Captain Kendall's slightly trembling voice sounded. Hearing this, the 5 great saints were all stunned. The holy weapons that were chopping down also stopped in midair. Then, the 5 of them uniformly looked at the black tiger under their feet and carefully examined it. Only now did the 5 of them clearly see that there was blood flowing out from the black tiger's neck. The black tiger's originally ferocious crimson eyes had also become empty and lifeless. Strange, how did this black tiger die? It was still alive and kicking a moment ago. How did it suddenly die? Hoopa asked with a puzzled expression. Hearing his words, the remaining 4 great saints exchanged glances with each other, their faces filled with confusion. Captain Kendall looked deeply at Jianshan and said, "This black tiger was killed by Jianshan." "What? Jianshan killed it? Captain, you're not joking, right?" Hearing Captain Kendall's words, Xiao Dao immediately jumped up and said with a face full of disbelief. Chapter 114. With regards to Jianshan's strength, the entire Flame mercenary group felt that he was only a saint. After all, Jianshan's mercenary badge was only D rank. Moreover, the most important factor was that Jianshan was just too young. In the Tianyuan continent, becoming a saint at the age of 20 was already a very bright future. They really couldn't imagine that Jianshan, who looked to be in his early 20s, would actually have the strength to easily kill a second-rank magical beast. Moreover, there was another reason. Among everyone present, besides Kendall who saw a blurry sword shadow, no one else was able to see how or when Jianshan had killed the black tiger. Kendall's gaze lingered on the slender light wind sword in Jianshan's hand for a while before he calmed down. He smiled and said, "Since you don't believe me, then go and ask Jianshan yourself." Kendall's tone actually carried a trace of excitement. His group had gained another expert. How could he not be excited? Xiao Dao was the first to be unable to hold back and immediately walked in front of Jianshan. He first looked at Jianshan from head to toe before his gaze landed on the bloodless light wind sword in his hand. He then said, "Jianshan, you have to be honest with me. Did you kill this black tiger?" Jianshan nodded slightly when he saw Xiao Dao's face filled with both anticipation and disbelief. He said, "That's right, it's me." Jianshan did not plan on hiding his strength at all, so he straightforwardly told him the truth. "Wah, no way." Xiao Dao's eyes widened as he looked at Jianshan in disbelief. He cried out in alarm, "Jianshan, did you really kill this second-rank magical beast? How did you kill it? Why didn't I see it?" Hearing Xiao Dao's words, everyone except Kendall stared at him. They also felt that it was very strange how Jianshan had killed the magical beast. This was because when the black tiger was about to pounce on Jianshan, Jianshan's body suddenly took a step to the side and a slender long sword appeared in his hand. As for how Jianshan had killed the black tiger, not a single one of them had noticed. Among everyone present, there was only one person who looked at Jianshan differently, and that was Kabooters. Kabooters looked at Jianshan with an expression that said, "Just as I expected." Jianshan's face revealed a trace of a bitter smile as he raised the light wind sword in his hand and said, "I killed it with my own saint weapon. As for why you didn't see it, that's because I was faster." Hearing Jianshan's words, Kendall recalled the flash of white light and couldn't help but feel a burst of fear. This was because he couldn't help but admit that Jianshan's sword was too fast. It was so fast that he could only catch a blurry image of the sword. At this moment, Kendall couldn't help but think to himself, if I were to face this lightning-fast sword, would I be able to successfully dodge or block it without suffering any injuries? Chang Ningfeng looked at the black tiger's corpse at his feet and immediately kicked the black tiger's body, causing it to roll over. He then stretched out his hand to push aside the black tiger's head, revealing the wound on its neck. But when everyone saw the fatal wound on the black tiger's neck, everyone, including Kendall, sucked in a breath of cold air. This was because this wound was too deep. 2/3 of the entire neck had been cut off, leaving only 1/3 of the neck connected to the head. Just a little bit more and the black tiger's head would have been cut off. What was even more unimaginable to them was that the black tiger was clearly making a forward motion, and its body was gliding in the air at a high speed. But under the black tiger's speed, Jianshan was actually able to clearly grasp the fatal point of the black tiger's throat and attack it. Just this alone wasn't something that anyone present could do. Deer took a deep breath and slowly calmed the shock in his heart. He looked at Jianshan with a complicated gaze, then a trace of a smile appeared on his face. He said, "Jianshan, we originally thought that you only had the strength of a saint. But now it seems that the situation is far from what we imagined. You really hid it from us all." Hupa also came to Jianshan. He stretched out a wide palm and fiercely slapped Jianshan's shoulder. He loudly said, "Jianshan, you're too much. Tell me honestly, what stage of strength have you reached? You can't be stronger than the commander, right?" Hearing Hupo's words, Jianshan helplessly smiled and said, "Brother Hupa, I'm not as strong as you say. My current strength is only about the same as yours, an intermediate great saint." "That's not right. How can an intermediate great saint kill a class 2 magical beast so easily?" Hupa softly murmured before raising his head again. Just when he wanted to continue asking, Jianshan suddenly said, "Let's deal with the magical beast's corpse quickly. We'll talk about other matters later." Even though everyone still had many doubts, they did not voice them. They began to deal with the black tiger's corpse. This black tiger is so powerful. Its strength should be at the peak of Tier 2, just one step away from Tier 3. After taking out the demon core, put the black tiger's corpse in a bag as well. We should be able to sell it for quite a bit of money, Captain KD instructed. On the Tianyuan continent, aside from the most common type of beef, most people ate the meat of magical beasts. Not only was the meat of magical beasts tender and delicious, it could also strengthen the body. As a result, the corpses of magical beasts were highly sought after on the Tianyuan continent. In particular, the corpses of high-class magical beasts were always in short supply. Jianshan put the breeze sword away and stood to the side as he silently watched the flame mercenaries put the black tiger's corpse in a large bag. Jianshan naturally did not care about the corpse of a Class 2 magical beast. After all, he could easily kill Class 2 or even Class 3 magical beasts. In Jianshan's hands, these magical beasts had basically lost all ability to escape. However, the flame mercenaries were different. Even though they had a saint master, their overall battle prowess was far inferior to Jianshan's. With the flame mercenary strength, killing a peak Class 2 magical beast was already very difficult. Moreover, if it were not for Jianshan stopping the black tiger when it tried to escape, they really would not have been able to catch up to it. After all, magical beasts were like fish in water in the forest. If humans wanted to move in the forest, they would be greatly restricted by the environment. At this moment, Jianshan's ears twitched slightly. He suddenly raised his head and looked to the side. Soon after, the weeds where Jianshan was looking began to sway violently. Soon after, over 20 mercenaries wearing helmets and armor appeared in front of Jianshan. They were armed to the teeth. When the fully armed mercenaries appeared in front of them, the members of the Flame Mercenaries stopped what they were doing. They all vigilantly stared at the 20 or so mercenaries in front of them with nervous expressions. The leader of the 20 or so fully armed mercenaries swept his cold gaze over the members of the Blaze mercenary group. His gaze then paused on the Black Tiger's corpse, half of which was already in his pocket. In the end, he waved his hand and shouted in a low voice, "Let's go!" With that, the leader led the 20 or so fully armed mercenaries and passed through the Flame Mercenaries without looking sideways. In the end, they disappeared into the forest. They did not even look at the members of the Flame Mercenaries. That's the Zhou Mercenaries. I never thought that I would actually meet them here. After the group of fully armed mercenaries left, Hupa muttered to himself, "Big brother Hupa, is the Zhou Mercenaries very famous?" Jianshan asked. Hearing this, Hupa nodded and said, "Although the Zhou mercenary group's strength isn't the strongest in Wake City, they are definitely in the top 10 of the mercenary groups that reside in Wake City. Their group has a total of 50 people, and their leader is a high-rank Saint Master. They also have 6 low-rank Saint Masters and 20 Great Saints under them. Their strength can be said to be extremely strong and definitely isn't something that our Raging Flame mercenary group can provoke. Moreover, the Zhou mercenary group has the support of one of Wake City's great families, the Zhou family. In Wake City, there aren't many powers that dare to offend the Zhou mercenary group." Oh! Jianshan looked in the direction that the Zhou mercenaries had disappeared in and did not take it to heart. Jianshan, if you meet other mercenaries in the Magical Beast Mountain range in the future, you must be extremely careful. In the Magical Beast Mountain range, murders and robberies are a common occurrence. Although some people wear the sign of mercenaries, their actions are even worse than bandits. Kendall walked in front of Jianshan and said with a serious expression. Seeing Kendall's serious expression, Jianshan nodded and said, "I will be careful." At this time, the Black Tiger's corpse had been put into their spatial belts. Kendall ordered, "Right now, there are already second-rank magical beasts roaming around here. If we go deeper, we might encounter even more powerful third-rank magical beasts. Therefore, we will continue to wander around this area." After that, Kendall and Deer bandaged their wounds. Fortunately, the wounds on their bodies were not deep and did not have much effect on their strength. When everything was ready, the group continued on their way, all of them vigilantly observing their surroundings. When the group had just walked for a while, Jianshan once again discovered traces of a magical beast. However, the situation this time was the same as before. This magical beast used the forest as a cover and stopped about 10 meters away from the mercenaries for a while before quietly retreating. Jianshan frowned as he pondered. He really did not understand what was going on. Along the way, other than killing a black tiger with the strength of a second-rank magical beast, he had discovered traces of close to 10 other magical beasts. However, these magical beasts did not jump out and attack them like the black tiger. Chapter 115. Jianshan's gaze swept over the few of them. Suddenly, a thought flashed through his mind. Right? It's the aura, it's the killing intent. Jianshan's eyes suddenly lit up. He immediately understood why most of the magical beasts they'd encountered along the way didn't dare to come out. It turned out that it was because of the aura and faint killing intent emitted from their bodies. Although those magical beasts didn't have intelligence, due to their innate advantage, their intuition was very strong. Once they sensed a powerful enemy that they couldn't fight against, their beastly instincts would make them cower in fear and retreat. Thinking of this, Jianshan immediately said, "Wait a moment. Everyone withdraw your aura. Otherwise, the rank 1 magical beasts we've encountered along the way won't dare to come out." Hearing this, Captain Kendall turned his head to look suspiciously at Jianshan and asked, "Jianshan, will this work?" "Whether it works or not, we'll know once we try." Jianshan didn't want to give any superfluous explanation. Hearing Jianshan's words, Caputus lowered his head and pondered for a moment. A trace of light gradually appeared in his eyes before he said, "Everyone, let's believe in Jianshan this time. We've rarely encountered rank 1 magical beasts in the past few times we've entered the magical beast forest. I've been suspicious about this situation for a long time, but I haven't been able to find an answer. Perhaps the situation really is as Jianshan says. Since even Caputus says so, we'll do as Jianshan says." The ones who spoke were the usually taciturn Zhou Dekai and his brother. Although Caputus only had the strength of a saint, due to his intelligence, he had come up with many good ideas for the flame mercenary group. Therefore, his words had a certain degree of persuasiveness to everyone. Following that, everyone followed Jianshan's instructions and kept their qi into their bodies. None of it leaked out. Just as everyone maintained this state for less than 3 kilometers, they encountered a Class 1 magical beast that took the initiative to attack them. This discovery made the flame mercenaries overjoyed. Although the price of a Class 1 monster core was much lower than that of a Class 2 monster core, hunting a Class 1 magical beast was extremely easy for them. Once they killed a Class 1 magical beast, their harvest would be even more bountiful. We've finally encountered a rank 1 magical beast. Leader Kendall, leave this magical beast to me, Caputus and Yu Xian. Xiao Dao shouted loudly in excitement. Soon after, a 2-qi-long dagger appeared in his hand. He took the lead to attack the Class 1 magical beast, while Caputus and Yu Xian followed closely behind. Seeing the 2-qi-long dagger in Xiao Dao's hand, Jianshan shook his head. No wonder he was called Xiao Dao. It turned out that the sacred weapon that Xiao Dao cultivated with was also a dagger. Immediately after, Jianshan's gaze swept past Yu Xian and Caputus. He saw that both of their sacred weapons were 2-handed greatswords. Next, Xiao Dao's group of 3 fought fiercely with the Class 1 magical beast. None of the 3 of them were much weaker than the Class 1 magical beast, so the battle was more frightening than dangerous. In the end, after a short fight, the 3 of them finally killed the Class 1 magical beast. As for their battle, Jianshan and the others who possessed the strength of a great saint didn't have any intention of interfering. It was equivalent to using the Class 1 magical beast as practice for Xiao Dao's group of 3. Along the way, they would encounter the attacks of Class 1 or Class 2 magical beasts almost every time they walked. This situation also allowed everyone to confirm that Jianshan's method was indeed effective. At night, everyone found an open area to rest. Then, they made a large bonfire and roasted the magical beast's meat while cleaning up the spoils of war that they had obtained today. Sitting in front of the bonfire, everyone used the flickering flames to look at the small pile of magical beast cores placed in front of Leader Kendall. Each of their faces revealed a very happy smile. "Everyone, I will now announce today's harvest." Leader Kendall had a happy smile on his face. He looked around and then continued, "Today, we have obtained a total of 20 magical beast cores. Among them, there are 7 Class 2 magical beast cores and 13 Class 1 magical beast cores. This amount is 4 to 5 times our previous harvest." Leader Kendall practically roared out the last sentence. From this, it could be seen how excited he was in his heart. This is all thanks to Jianshan. If it wasn't for his advice, I'm afraid we wouldn't even have encountered a Class 1 magical beast today. Hoopa drank a mouthful of wine and laughed loudly. Chang Ningfeng also chuckled and said, "Hoopa is right. Today's harvest is all thanks to little brother Jianshan." Moreover, among the 7 Class 2 magical beasts, Jianshan alone killed 3. "Come, little brother Jianshan, drink a mouthful." As he spoke, Chang Ningfeng handed the wine jug in his hand to Jianshan. Jianshan didn't stand on ceremony and took a big gulp from the jug of wine Chang Ningfeng handed over. He smiled and said, "Everyone, don't say that. When it comes to contributions, everyone has contributed. But one thing is for sure, this time, our harvest in the magical Beast Mountain range will definitely be much more than usual." That's right. This time, with an expert like little brother Jianshan here, our flame mercenaries will definitely have the most bountiful harvest we've ever had. Leader Kendall laughed heartily. "Looking at this small pile of magical beast cores, I feel like I can already see my dream coming true step by step." "Leader, then what's your dream?" Xiao Dao asked curiously. My dream is to make our flame mercenaries become the #1 mercenary group on the Tianyuan continent. Leader Kendall laughed heartily and said in an impassioned tone, "This is the greatest dream of my life." Hearing this, everyone roared with laughter. #1 mercenary group on the Tianyuan continent, Kendall. Your dream is destined to never come true, Hoopa said without any respect. That's right. Hoopa's right. Kendall, your dream is far too whimsical. According to what you've said, I still hope to become the #1 expert on the Tianyuan continent, Deer chuckled as well. Haha, #1 expert on the continent? In your dreams? Xianxia sat before the fire as he watched everyone chat with a smile. He would also laugh out loud from time to time. At that moment, he actually felt an extremely rare sliver of happiness from the bottom of his heart. Although they were all joking around, the deep friendship that they unintentionally revealed unknowingly affected Xianxia's soul. After eating and drinking to their heart's content, a person from the flame mercenaries scattered a ring of medicinal powder around where everyone was resting to prevent the smell from wafting out while they were resting from attracting wild beasts or magical beasts. After that, he extinguished the fire and returned to his tent to rest. Xianxia lazily laid in his tent as he thought about some random things. Currently, he did not have any other monster cores apart from the 2 Class 4 monster cores. Even if he wanted to cultivate, he would not be able to find any monster cores to absorb. As for the 2 Class 4 monster cores, Xianxia did not want to touch them right now. He wanted to wait until he reached the Saint Master level before absorbing their energy. Looks like I should encourage Leader Kendall and the others to hunt Class 3 magical beasts tomorrow. At the very least, I need to obtain 3 Class 3 monster cores every day. Otherwise, I won't be able to cultivate for the next few days, Xianxia thought to himself as he laid in his tent. With my own strength, hunting ordinary Class 3 magical beasts is not a problem at all. If Leader Kendall and the others work together, they should be able to hold off 2 Class 3 monster cores. As long as we don't encounter 4 Class 3 magical beasts at the same time, there won't be any danger. Yep, there's also the flame mercenaries. I can only stay here for a month at most. Leader Kendall and the others are very nice, so I should do my best to obtain some monster cores for them during this period of time. After a month, I'll leave the flame mercenaries and do my best to increase my strength. I'll treat this month as a relaxing time for myself. After all, the poison resistance factor I absorbed from the silver-striped golden snake's blood has yet to perfectly fuse with my blood. This will take some time, and during this period of time, I need to avoid injury as much as possible. Once I'm injured, the poison resistance factor in my blood will decrease with the loss of blood. Only when the poison resistance factor has perfectly fused with my blood will the circulation of my blood transform my entire body, causing my entire body to possess the poison resistance factor. Only then will my blood naturally possess the poison resistance factor. From then on, not only will I be immune to all poisons, my blood will also be able to detoxify others. As long as I don't encounter a poison stronger than the silver-striped golden snakes, there's no poison that my blood can't neutralize. Xianxia lay in his tent late into the night. Countless thoughts flashed through his mind as well as his future plans. In the end, he calmed down and listened to his surroundings. After confirming that it was safe, he sat down in his tent again and silently absorbed the energy of the world to cultivate. Chapter 116. The next morning, when the sky began to brighten, Xianxia slowly opened his eyes after absorbing the energy of the world for an entire night. Sensing that his saint force had not increased at all, Xianxia let out a long sigh. Although the rate at which he absorbed the energy of the world was much faster than before, almost all of it had been stolen away by the 2 specks of light in his dantian. The amount that he could absorb himself was basically negligible. Leaving the tent, Xianxia stood outside and took in a few deep breaths of the fresh morning air. He then slowly raised his head and looked at the dense foliage above him. It was still early, so the sky was still hazy. It was not completely bright yet, and the east where the sun rose every day was always dusky. Jianshan shook his head in disappointment when he heard the soft breathing and occasional snoring from the other tents. With his hearing, he could easily tell that all the people of the flame mercenaries were sleeping. Not a single one of them was cultivating. Sigh, how can I increase my strength if I'm so lazy? Although talent is very important on the path of cultivation, diligence is even more important than talent. No matter how talented a person is, if they don't cultivate diligently, their achievements will be worse than someone with mediocre talent who cultivates diligently, Jianshan thought to himself. Afterward, Jianshan went to the woods to find some dry branches. He made a fire and made a simple grill. Then he put a few pieces of magical beast meat on the grill and roasted it. Perhaps he had been roused by the commotion outside, but Kendall's head popped out of the tent. Seeing Jianshan roasting meat, he smiled. Jianshan, you're up so early. Jianshan replied without even turning his head, it's almost dawn. It's not early. Kendall looked at the still hazy sky and chuckled. He did not say anything else before coming out of the tent and sitting down in front of the fire. Not long after Kendall came out, the other people of the flame mercenaries seemed to have been woken up by the noise outside. They all came out of their tents and immediately put their tents away into their space belts. Once everything was done, everyone gathered in front of the fire and sat down. Hoopa held a jug of alcohol as he drank by himself. Seeing that everyone was present, Jianshan raised his head and looked at Kendall. He said, Captain Kendall, what are your plans for the next operation? We'll obviously continue to hunt Class 1 and Class 2 magical beasts in this area. We'll stay in the magical beast mountain range for a few days and only leave after we've reaped a bountiful harvest, Kendall indifferently said. Jianshan fell silent for a while before speaking up again. Captain Kendall, I have a suggestion, but I don't know if I should say it. Kendall's gaze landed on Jianshan as he smiled. Jianshan, just say what you want to say. There's no need to hold back. Since you've joined our flame mercenaries, we're all brothers regardless of age. It's fine even if you say something wrong. My suggestion is that we go deeper and directly hunt Class 3 magical beasts. Jianshan calmly looked at Kendall. What? Hunt Class 3 magical beasts? Jianshan, are you crazy? A peak Class 2 black tiger is already so hard to kill, let alone a Class 3 magical beast. Xiao Dao looked at Jianshan in shock. Although the flame mercenaries had gained a mid-saint, Jianshan, in Xiao Dao's opinion, it would still be rather difficult for him to hunt Class 3 magical beasts with such strength. Everyone frowned when they heard Jianshan's suggestion. Although the flame mercenaries had a beginner saint master and 6 great saints, magical beasts were definitely much more powerful than humans of the same level due to their innate advantage. Unless they possessed battle skills or elemental saint force, it was basically impossible for a human to kill a magical beast of the same level as them. Even if they could, they would have to pay an extremely heavy price. On the other hand, the flame mercenaries would be able to barely kill Class 3 magical beasts that appeared in the magical beast mountain range if they encountered a Class 3 magical beast at the beginning. However, if they encountered a Class 3 magical beast at the peak, the flame mercenaries would be powerless. After all, not only had Captain Kendall and Chang Ningfeng suffered some light injuries from killing a peak Class 2 magical beast, but at the final moment, if it weren't for Jianshan's interference, they probably wouldn't have been able to kill the black tiger that was still at the peak of Class 2. As a result, Jianshan's suggestion of hunting a Class 3 magical beast was undoubtedly suicidal in the eyes of the flame mercenaries. A strange light flashed through Caputus's eyes as he looked at Jianshan. He asked, Jianshan, since you've taken the initiative to bring up the matter of hunting a Class 3 magical beast, you must possess the strength to do so. Jianshan hesitated for a moment before nodding. As long as we don't encounter 3 Class 3 magical beasts at the same time, we won't be in any danger at all. Everyone's eyes lit up. They looked at Jianshan with shock, surprise, doubt, disbelief, and many other complicated gazes. Jianshan, is what you said true? As long as we don't encounter 3 Class 3 magical beasts at the same time, we won't be in any danger at all. Captain Kendall's breathing became heavy as he asked urgently. If it really was as safe as Jianshan said, then Captain Kendall would definitely drag Jianshan to hunt a Class 3 magical beast no matter what. After all, The value of a Class 3 magical beast's corpse and monster core was several times greater than that of a Class 2 magical beast. Xianxia, do you really have the strength to kill a Class 3 magical beast? Dier's voice was filled with disbelief. Although Xianxia had killed a peak Class 2 black tiger before, that black tiger had been heavily injured. Its strength could not be compared to a Class 3 magical beast at full strength. Yeah, Xianxia, you can't be careless in this matter. Otherwise, you'll lose your life. The one who spoke was Chang Ningfeng. His voice was filled with seriousness. Xianxia looked at everyone with a smile. He did not feel the slightest bit of displeasure from everyone's reaction. After all, with the Flame Mercenaries' current strength, hunting a Class 3 magical beast was indeed a little too difficult. The slightest carelessness could lead to casualties. Everyone's caution was within reason. Why don't you all trust me this time? On the other hand, if we really can't deal with a Class 3 magical beast, we have the strength to retreat unscathed. Xianxia's voice was filled with confidence. Everyone's gazes immediately gathered on Kendall when they heard that. Such an important matter still needed to be decided by Kendall himself. Kendall sucked in a deep breath as he stared at Xianxia with shining eyes. When he saw the confidence on Xianxia's face, he clenched his teeth and finally made up his mind. He called out, "All right, we'll do it this time. Xianxia, since you're so confident, I'll temporarily give you command of the group. You can decide what to do. Does anyone have any objections?" As he said that, he swept his gaze across everyone. "I have no objections. I have no objections. I have no objections either." Kendall's decision passed through everyone very quickly. No one had any objections, and it was passed by everyone. Seeing this, Xianxia finally revealed a trace of a happy smile. He said, "All right, since everyone trusts me so much, I definitely won't disappoint everyone. Let me make the arrangements right now." Xianxia paused for a moment before continuing, "I'll lead the way. Everyone else will remain in the same position. If we encounter a Class 3 magical beast, I'll go first. You all pay attention to the surroundings to prevent other magical beasts from taking advantage of the chaos to attack. If other magical beasts appear, do your best to stall them. Remember, don't go all out. Just stall them." The members of the Flame Mercenaries looked at each other when they heard this. They could see great doubt and surprise in each other's eyes. They were indeed very curious as to how Xianxia, who was only a mid-level great saint, could hunt Class 3 magical beasts by himself. Moreover, it wasn't difficult to tell from his words that he didn't care about Class 3 monster cores at all. After breakfast, everyone packed up their things and set off for the depths of the magical beast mountain range once more. However, their formation had already changed. Xianxia walked 10 meters ahead of everyone by himself, while the others maintained their formation from before. The entire group didn't give off the slightest bit of aura or killing intent. Instead, they attracted quite a few Class 1 magical beasts along the way. However, because they were in a hurry, these Class 1 magical beasts weren't handed over to Xiao Dao and the others to deal with. Instead, they were directly killed by the great saints of the Flame Mercenaries. As everyone continuously ventured deeper into the forest, the terrain of the forest began to deteriorate. Swamps that were difficult to see with the naked eye covered the ground, and all sorts of poisonous insects and plants were everywhere. Occasionally, they would even be attacked by some special plants that could eat people. Everyone maintained a vigilant state along the way. They paid attention to the ground beneath their feet while paying attention to their surroundings as they carefully advanced. Along the way, they obtained a few more Class 1 and Class 2 monster cores, but as they continuously ventured deeper into the forest, the number of Class 1 magical beasts decreased. However, the number of Class 1 magical beasts gradually decreased, while Class 2 magical beasts would appear almost every once in a while. At this moment, Xianxia's ears twitched slightly as he walked at the front. Afterwards, he suddenly stopped and raised his hand to signal the members of the Flame Mercenaries behind him to stop as well. Noticing Xianxia's actions, the members of the Flame Mercenaries immediately stopped as well. All of them nervously observed their surroundings. Even though Jianshan had repeatedly assured them that there would basically be no danger as long as they didn't encounter more than 2 Class 3 magical beasts at the same time, everyone was still nervous. After all, they were facing Class 3 magical beasts this time, not ordinary Class 2 magical beasts. Although Class 2 magical beasts and Class 3 magical beasts only differed by a single rank, the difference in strength was several times greater. At this moment, the roar of a wild beast rang out from up ahead. As the weeds in front swayed violently, a huge magical beast that was 2 meters tall appeared before everyone's eyes. This magical beast looked like a wild boar with a long nose. The only difference between it and a wild boar was the corner of its mouth. There was a pair of snow-white fangs that were a foot long, and there was a single horn on its forehead. Captain Kendall swept his gaze over the magical beast before him and immediately became serious. He said, "A unicorn magical boar. Jianshan, be careful. This is a Class 3 unicorn magical boar." Jianshan faintly nodded as he calmly stared at the unicorn magical boar in front of him. The silver-white light wind sword gradually appeared in his right hand as a layer of hazy sword light was emitted, enveloping the entire sword. Chapter 117. Seeing Jianshan rush towards the horned demon boar alone, the members of the Raging Flame mercenary group all stared with wide eyes at Jianshan's body. They all wanted to see just how Jianshan would be able to kill a Class 3 horned demon boar. Captain Kendall's face was grave as he quickly gathered Saint Force from his right hand and formed a large axe. He gripped the axe tightly with both hands as his sharp eyes stared unblinkingly at Jianshan's weak body. If Jianshan was unable to block the Class 3 horned demon boar's attack, then Kendall would not hesitate to rush forward and save Jianshan. In this group, perhaps only Kendall would be able to contend against the horned demon boar. Jianshan's body was like a ghost as he appeared in front of the horned demon boar with an extremely fast speed. The light wind sword in his hand turned into a silvery white light, as if it had turned into a bolt of lightning as it pierced towards the horned demon boar's throat. A vicious light flickered in the single-horned demon boar's eyes as it stared at the incoming silver-white light. A sliver of graveness appeared in its eyes as it produced a deep growl. Its heavy body quickly retreated as it tried its best to twist its upper body to the side in an attempt to dodge Jianshan's attack. Although the horned demon boar tried its best to dodge, its large body was just too heavy. Adding on the fact that speed was the horned demon boar's weakness, it was impossible for it to dodge Jianshan's lightning-fast attack. Pooh! The light wind sword pierced deeply into the single-horned demon boar's throat, ending its life in an instant. Following that, the single-horned demon boar's body suddenly stiffened, and its pair of large eyes gradually lost its shape. In the end, it didn't even have time to scream before its entire body fell to the ground. Jianshan pulled the light wind sword out of the horned demon boar's throat, and with a thought, the blood on the sword began to flow and gather at the tip of the sword. Finally, the blood dripped down the sword and dripped to the ground. Putting the light wind sword back into his body, Jianshan's face revealed a satisfied smile. Ever since he had reached the intermediate Great Saint realm, his battle prowess had increased by a lot. Whether it was his speed or the light wind sword's sharpness, they had all increased by a lot. Now, it was much easier for him to kill Class 3 horned demon boars. Looking at the Class 3 horned demon boar lying on the ground, Jianshan calmly said, "Captain Kendall, I'll leave this Class 3 horned demon boar's corpse to you guys." After Jianshan finished speaking, not a single sound came from behind him. Noticing the strangeness behind him, Jianshan turned around to look. He saw that everyone from the Raging Flame mercenary group had their eyes wide open as they stared blankly at the horned demon boar lying on the ground. Their faces were filled with shock and disbelief. Seeing the wonderful expressions on everyone's faces, Jianshan bitterly smiled and shook his head. In the eyes of the Raging Flame mercenary group, a Class 3 horned demon boar was something that even if they gathered all of their strength, it would still be very difficult to kill. But with just one attack, he had completely ended the life of this Class 3 horned demon boar. Anyone would be shocked by this scene. After everyone was stunned for a while, Captain Kendall was the first to recover. He let out a long breath and slowly suppressed the shock in his heart. Looking at Jianchen with a complicated gaze, he sighed, "Jianchen, your strength hasn't changed at all. You're too abnormal. How could a class 3 horned demon boar be so weak in your hands? You killed it so effortlessly. This is a class 3 horned demon boar we're talking about." Afterward, the others all returned to their senses. They all looked at Jianchen with complicated gazes. Their eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. Chang Ningfeng let out a long sigh and lamented, "Sigh, it's really hard to imagine that this was actually a class 3 horned demon beast. I'm almost beginning to suspect that this horned demon boar is a class 1 horned demon beast." Hearing that, everyone nodded in agreement. At this moment, Deer said, "Jianchen, are you really only a mid-great saint? Seeing how you can kill a class 3 horned demon beast so easily, I'm almost beginning to suspect that you're already a great saint master or even an earth saint master." Deer looked at Jianchen with a complicated gaze that contained some envy. After all, it would be a lie to say that he wasn't envious of Jianchen for possessing such great strength at such a young age. Kabooters hesitated for a moment before saying, "Jianchen, was that a high-tier battle skill you just used? I completely didn't see when your sword pierced the horned demon boar's neck." "Yeah, I didn't see it clearly either. I didn't even see a shadow." Hoopa seemed extremely gloomy. Hearing that, Jianchen smiled and said, "It's not a battle skill. It's just that the speed of my sword was a little faster. It was actually so fast that I couldn't see it clearly. Isn't that speed a little too terrifying?" Deer said in a low voice. Captain Kendall arrived in front of the horned demon boar and said, "All right, now isn't the time to discuss this. Everyone come over and deal with the corpse of this horned demon boar." Afterward, everyone arrived in front of the horned demon boar. Xiao Dao took out his saint weapon and viciously stabbed at the horned demon boar's stomach in an attempt to extract the monster core. However, after stabbing with all his strength, Xiao Dao only managed to leave a finger-wide wound on the horned demon boar's body. Although the horned demon boar's defense was not outstanding, it was still a class 3 magical beast after all. Magical beasts were famous for their thick hides. With the Xiao Dao saint's strength, it was impossible for him to cut open the horned demon boar's stomach without using a great deal of strength. Seeing the finger-long wound that Xiao Dao had left on the horned demon boar's stomach, Deer helplessly shook his head. He arrived in front of Xiao Dao and said, "Xiao Dao, let me do it." As he said that, saint force surged from Deer's right hand and gradually formed a huge two-handed sword. The hides of class 3 magical beasts are really thick. "I've learned a lot today," Xiao Dao cursed and obediently moved aside. Afterward, Deer used the two-handed sword to cut open the horned demon boar's stomach and successfully extracted a class 3 monster core covered in blood. After wiping the blood off, he glanced at Jianchen and Kendall. After a slight hesitation, he took the monster core to Jianchen and said, "Brother Jianchen, this horned demon boar was killed by you alone, so this monster core is still yours." Before Deer could finish, Jianchen interrupted him, "Uncle Deer, according to the rules of the group, this monster core should be given to Captain Kendall for safekeeping. We'll split it in the end." That doesn't seem to be a good idea," Deer hesitated. "There's nothing bad about it. Uncle Deer, give it to Captain Kendall for safekeeping." Jianchen's face was resolute and his tone left no room for discussion. All right then, Deer had no other choice but to hand the monster core to Captain Kendall. Kendall looked deeply at Jianchen and did not refuse. He directly extended his hand and received the class 3 monster core. He said, "Since that's the case, I'll temporarily safekeep this monster core for you. Once we leave the magical beast mountain range, we'll split the spoils according to the amount of contribution." Afterward, everyone separated out a space and placed the horned demon boar's corpse inside before continuing on their journey. The corpse of a class 3 magical beast could be sold for quite a bit of money. The flame mercenaries obviously would not let it go. Time quickly passed. Unknowingly, they had already spent 10 days in the magical beast mountain range. These 10 days were definitely the happiest time for everyone in the flame mercenaries. This was because apart from the first day, they had spent the remaining 9 days hunting class 3 magical beasts under Jianchen's lead. As Jianxin's actual battle prowess had far surpassed Saint Master's, hunting Class 3 magical beasts was not difficult for him at all. Moreover, ever since he had reached mid-Great Saint, Jianxin had not been injured even once when he fought against Class 3 magical beasts. During this time, everyone in the Flame Mercenaries had long since become accustomed to the great strength Jianxin displayed. As Jianxin's strength was exposed, his status in the Flame Mercenaries continuously rose. Now, including Captain Kendall, practically everyone was either extremely respectful or extremely courteous to him. This was because in these 10 days, Jianxin had brought an extremely large amount of wealth to the Flame Mercenaries. During these 10 days, just Jianxin alone had killed over 100 Class 3 magical beasts and close to 300 Class 2 magical beasts. On the other hand, the Flame Mercenaries had very little to do. They had basically become the people who followed behind Jianxin and collected the corpses. Even so, they did not feel the slightest bit of resentment or injustice. Instead, they were extremely happy to collect the corpses. In their eyes, this was completely like bending over to pick up money. At night, a full moon hung high in the pitch-black night sky, emitting a layer of hazy moonlight that illuminated the world. And in a wide area of the mountain range of magical beasts, there was a large pile of torches burning fiercely. The dancing flames looked like dancing fairies. 10 people clad in animal skins were sitting in a circle around the bonfire. They were the blazing Flame Mercenaries. Over the past few days, we've collected a total of 125 Class 3 magical beasts and 364 Class 2 magical beasts. There are fewer Class 1 magical beasts, less than 30. There are also a few Class 3 magical beast corpses. Captain Kendall excitedly announced their harvest from the past 10 days in the magical Beast Mountain range. Chapter 118. After 10 days of running around, I think our brothers are all tired. Moreover, we don't have much supplies left in our spatial belts. Thus, I think we should leave the magical Beast Mountain range early tomorrow morning and return to Wake City. After that, we can rest for a few days and relax. Does anyone have any objections? Captain Kendall said. Hearing this, everyone looked at Jianxin. Deer directly said, Jianxin, you should make the decision on this matter. Jianxin added branches to the fire as he said, Captain Kendall can make the decision. I don't mind. Hearing this, Kendall hesitated again before sweeping his gaze over everyone. Since little brother Jianxin doesn't have any objections, then let's leave the magical Beast Mountain range tomorrow morning and return to Wake City to rest for a few days. Moreover, Jianxin has been fighting Class 3 magical beasts non-stop these past few days. His body should be a bit tired. There was a rare trace of reluctance in Kendall's voice. Class 3 magical beasts were something the Flame Mercenary group normally had to consider their own strength before even provoking them. However, they had been following behind Jianxin for the past few days. Just picking up Class 3 magical beast corpses was enough to make their hands go soft. This kind of situation was definitely an incomparably happy thing for everyone in the Flame Mercenary group. If conditions permitted, everyone in the Flame Mercenary group really hoped that they could stay here for a few more days. However, they were also very clear that Jianxin had been fighting Class 3 magical beasts non-stop for the past few days. Even though he hadn't suffered any injuries, it was inevitable that his body and mind would be tired. He still needed time to rest and properly adjust his body's condition. When we return, the first thing we have to do is get rid of the corpses in our space belts. The longer these things are stored, the less fresh they will be. When that time comes, their value will greatly decrease. Xiao Dao muttered as he touched the space belt around his waist. Following Xiao Dao's actions, everyone subconsciously reached out to touch the space belts around their waists. Right now, there were 1 or 2 or even 3 or 4 smaller Class 3 magical beast corpses in their space belts. The items in their space belts had all been gathered in Kendall's hands. After all, with their wealth, they didn't have any valuable items on them. Just at this moment, a fragrant smell wafted out from the fire. A few large pieces of magical beast meat on the rack had already turned golden. Drops of fat were being squeezed out of the meat and continuously dripped into the fire below, making sizzling sounds. Smelling this thick fragrance, everyone's appetite was greatly aroused. Some people's stomachs even began to rumble. Suddenly, Xianxian's ears twitched slightly. He immediately turned around, but as soon as he turned around, a tiny, beast-like figure shot towards him from the darkness in the distance. Xianxian only felt his vision blur as the tiny figure approached him. "Everyone be careful!" Xianxian roared. He didn't have time to see what kind of magical beast that small body was. His hands abruptly pushed against the ground, and his body that was sitting cross-legged on the ground suddenly jumped up. In the air, the silver-white light wind sword appeared in Xianxian's right hand. The rest of the Raging Flame mercenaries weren't slow either. Almost as soon as they heard Xianxian's roar, everyone stood up from the ground and took out their saint weapons, vigilantly scanning their surroundings. Xianxian's body somersaulted a few times in the air before landing firmly on the ground 3 meters away. His eyes were fixed on the burning bonfire. Beside the bonfire, there was actually a small beast about a foot long. The small beast looked very cute. Its body of pure golden fur seemed to emit a faint glow under the light of the bonfire. The small beast's eyes were fixed on the bonfire, emitting a rich aroma of magical beast meat. Its small tongue was constantly sticking out of its mouth, licking its lips. Its 2 front paws were impatiently moving in place, as if it couldn't wait any longer. Looking at the small beast in front of him, Xianxian immediately let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the small beast's current appearance, it was clearly attracted by the aroma of the magical beast meat. "Xianxian, what's going on?" At this time, Captain Kendall's voice sounded. Ever since he'd heard Xianxian's roar, he'd immediately become vigilant. However, after observing the surroundings, he didn't discover anything. Xianxian smiled bitterly. "Nothing, it's just that this thing suddenly ran out." As he spoke, Xianxian pointed at the small beast standing in front of the bonfire. Hearing this, everyone's gazes followed the direction Xianxian was pointing at. Only now did they discover that a small beast had appeared in front of the bonfire at some unknown time. "This is..." Everyone looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. Captain Kendall took a few steps forward and bent down slightly. He stared at the small beast in front of him and sized it up. Afterwards, a thoughtful look appeared in his eyes as he said, "It looks like this should be the cub of a magical beast. Xianxian, can you tell the origin of this small beast and what breed it is?" Xianxian slowly walked in front of the small beast and slowly squatted down to size it up. However, the small beast in front of him wasn't the slightest bit afraid of the strangers around it. It didn't even look at them. Its pair of small eyes only stared at the magical beast meat roasting on the bonfire. It wasn't clear whether it was because it wasn't afraid of these people at all or because it was too young, but it didn't feel any fear at all. Seeing the small beast like this, Xianxian couldn't help but smile. He reached out and picked up a wooden stick with a large piece of magical beast meat stuck on it. He tore off a piece of golden roasted meat and sniffed it a few times. "L-O! L-O! L-O!" The small beast's eyes stared closely at the piece of magical beast meat that Xianxian tore off. Its 4 hooves impatiently stomped on the ground. In the end, it actually stood up on its hind legs and kept making "L-O" sounds. Saliva was already dripping from the corner of its mouth. Seeing that the small beast wanted to eat this piece of meat so much, Xianxian no longer continued to tempt the small beast. He directly tore off the piece of magical beast meat and put it in the small beast's mouth. The small beast immediately stretched out 2 front paws and tightly hugged the magical beast meat. Then it was not afraid of the heat and directly ate it. Xianxian stretched out a hand and directly picked up the small beast. He held it in front of his eyes and carefully looked at it. The small beast didn't seem to realize that it had been picked up by others. It was still eating the magical beast meat that it was holding in front of its paws. Staring at the small beast for a while, Xianxian's face gradually became interesting. Finally, his face gradually showed a trace of excitement. "Xianxian, you know the origin of this cub. What kind of species is it?" Looking at the expression on Xianxian's face, Chang Ningfeng couldn't help but ask. Jianshan slowly put down the small beast. With a somewhat excited voice, he said, "If I've guessed correctly, this should be the cub of the Class 5 Golden Tiger King." "What? The cub of the Class 5 Golden Tiger King? Jianshan, are you sure you didn't see wrong?" Cabs covered his mouth. His voice was filled with unconcealable shock. As for the others, their faces were also filled with shock and disbelief. Although the cub of the Class 5 Golden Tiger King wasn't very strong when it was young, this kind of magical beast was blessed by the heavens. After reaching adulthood, it would directly possess the strength of an Earth Saint Master. It wouldn't encounter any obstacles along the way. It could be said that it would be smooth sailing. Moreover, it would have a lot of room for improvement in the future. It wasn't like other magical beasts. After reaching adulthood, they would have to go through a long period of cultivation to increase their strength step by step. Whether they could cultivate to the level of a Class 5 magical beast was still unknown. Jianshan stared at the little beast that was eating with relish. He said, "It shouldn't be wrong." In the library of Kargath Academy, Jianshan had read quite a lot about magical beasts. As a result, Jianshan was extremely familiar with many species of magical beasts on the Tianyuan continent. The most eye-catching part of the Golden Tiger King was its golden fur and the word "King" on its head. Coupled with the cub's size, Jianshan was able to confirm the origins of the cub with a single glance. The people of the Flame Mercenaries all sucked in a deep breath. At that moment, all of their hearts began to thump uncontrollably. Even though the cub of a Class 5 magical beast was nowhere near Class 5 and needed a certain amount of time to mature, it was still far more valuable than a mature Class 5 magical beast. This was because a mature Class 5 magical beast already possessed a certain amount of intelligence. They would rather die than submit to a human and become a human's pet or mount. As a result, taming a mature magical beast was extremely difficult. However, a cub was different. As a cub's intelligence had not matured yet, taming it was extremely easy. It was also extremely easy to nurture its emotions. Once a cub of a Class 5 magical beast was tamed from a young age, not only would it possess the strength of a Class 5 magical beast by the time it reached adulthood, but it would also have a lot of room for growth. It was extremely possible for it to reach Class 6 or even Class 7. Most importantly, at that time, the mature magical beast would have already developed deep feelings for the human that fed it. As a result, it would be possible to obtain a powerful magical beast without spending too much effort. Once a magical beast recognized a master, its loyalty would be extremely high. It would never harbor any thoughts of betrayal in its entire life. As a result, a cub of a Class 5 magical beast was basically a priceless existence on the market. If a cub of a Class 5 magical beast suddenly appeared somewhere, there would definitely be quite a few powerful organizations fighting over it. I never thought that we would actually find a cub of a Class 5 magical beast, and it's one that delivered itself to us. Our luck is just too good, Xiao Dao said excitedly. Hee hee, if I were to sell this 5th order cub, I wonder how much I would be able to get. Hu Po's face was also filled with excitement. He looked at the golden-furred Tiger King cub as if he was looking at a glittering mountain of gold. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.